So I want to talk about that for one more second because I think people listening, whether it's because the topic is so uncomfortable for people to get into so they don't know the facts or whatever it is, but I feel like there's a huge misconception with what human child trafficking is because
Hmm.
most of us civilians are like, that would never happen in my community. That would never happen to
Oh,
my child. That it's like for people in low income areas that don't know any better, who are very vulnerable, but there's got to be a vulnerable moment for my child. She's on her phone all day long. And I know that there are people she's playing Roblox with that are not little kids, they're older men or women. I mean, I don't know I don't think the sex discriminates, right? So I find it fascinating that more people aren't more astute or want to hear more about the topic because they think not my kid.
right. And they were correct to think that pre-internet. The internet
Okay.
has changed everything. So the way that I'm 46 years old. I'm getting considerably older, it seems like by the minute. But I remember where my family would be driving to church and we would end up going through a tough a rough spot in town, and you would see what were thought to be prostitutes, which were most likely human trafficking victims, under the control of a trafficker, aka a pimp. But you would see these prostitutes walking the streets, and we would kind of, as little kids, we'd make fun of them, and we would think it was funny. But for the most part, people thought that these were women who were making a choice to go sell themselves for sex, and that's how they were choosing to make their living. And
Mm.
that does happen, right? Even in this day and age, like prostitution is a very real thing. Prostitution and human trafficking are two completely different things.
I was going to ask you
Um,
that. Yeah. Okay. So they
yeah,
cannot be considered the same. If a woman is making the choice to do this, even
that
if
is
she
not
has
human
a,
trafficking.
but even if she has a pimp,
So if
what
she
does
has
that
a
mean?
pimp, that is going to be that is always going to end up in a trafficking scenario. We've never seen it not end up in a trafficking
But don't
scenario,
you
right?
think that they look at that pimp as like an agent that just gets them more work?
Well, so sometimes that's exactly how the pimp, how the trafficker will sell themselves. Again,
Got it.
they talk about themselves as entrepreneurs and all
Got it.
that. But even when you talk to even the high end escorts who had these different services, they would tell you that yeah, it started there, and then it always devolved into force where they were taking the major majority of the money. It always ended up there, and
Okay.
so when we talk about human trafficking, the way that we want to think about it, also, human trafficking is not a southern border issue. That's human smuggling, right? Human trafficking is when a person is being forced, defrauded, or coerced into performing labor or a service for somebody else's economic benefit.
Okay.
Slavery. One person does the work, somebody else gets the money.
Okay.
Slavery, right? So so when we talk about human trafficking and then especially child trafficking, there people will say, oh, they'll use the term child prostitute. That's not real. There's no such thing as a child prostitute. Anybody under the age of 18 legally is not allowed to make the decision to sell themselves for sex. So all commercial sex, and I do mean all commercial sex with anybody under the age of 18 is rape. Full stop. That is what it is under the law. Uh,
And
so,
that's what they would be prosecuted for.
off, yes, that or child trafficking, or any number of other charges. There's a litany of charges that prosecutors can use. So, so back to what you were saying, I
Yeah.
thought this
Sorry.
was something that happened in low income neighborhoods.
Mm.
Pre-internet, you're right. And pre-internet, the reason it happened in low-income neighborhoods is because you had young girls primarily, even though this does happen to boys as well, and increasingly it's happening to preteen and teen boys.
Mm.
But it's before the internet, it was young girls who were under supervised because maybe dad wasn't in the picture and mom was working multiple jobs. And so, she's kind of on her own and she meets the creepy guy who knows how to target her. And voila, she becomes a trafficking victim. That's the way it used to happen.
Right.
Well, with these, which are broadband connected microcomputers that are in everybody's pockets, right? These cell phones. What
Mm.
these cell phones have done is made it so that that creepy guy can access every young girl on the planet. and and every teenager and preteen on the planet, boys too. And what do we know about teenagers? They make really dumb decisions. That's why we don't allow them to drive when they're 13. We don't allow them to vote when they're 13. We don't allow them to really have autonomy because they make dumb decisions. And
Right.
so this phone has made it so that their dumb decisions can actually be used as weapons against them. And the
Right.
statistic I like to point out to people actually comes from the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, which is a phenomenal organization.
Mhm.
And so keep in mind, this is only talking about under 18. This statistic doesn't include the 18, 19, 20-year-old college girl who gets trafficked. They found that from 2010 to 2015, they had an 846% increase in suspected child trafficking cases.
Wow.
And what happened between 2010 and 2015? Well, the iPhone came out.
Mhm.
We had broadband. Broadband became more affordable, so more people had it. And you had Facebook app, the first social media app to hit. And what that did was it allowed the predator to not just access the prey that they could in their own community, they could suddenly access prey from everywhere. Now
Right.
you add the anonymity on that the internet provides, and you have a 40-year-old male who's 3,000 miles away from a 13-year-old girl who just made a social media post about how she's mad at her mom for not letting her wear the mini skirt, not letting her wear some age inappropriate clothing.
Mhm.
And that trafficker slides right into her DMs and starts telling her all the things that she wants to hear. And, oh, you're so pretty. Your mom's just jealous of you. She's trying to keep you from growing up.
And
And
catches her at
then,
this vulnerable moment that we were talking about
yep,
before. Yeah.
yep.
Yeah.
So targets her at the very moment of vulnerability and then gets her to do things, sends her gifts. And today gets her to send a photo that she regrets.
Yeah.
And then uses that to control her. And in a place in California, I had a trafficking case that we were working with law enforcement where the school was a school with a very recognizable name. It's a private high school.
Mhm.
The girl who was the trafficking victim has a very recognizable last name. The school was tens of thousands of dollars a year to attend. Very, very wealthy, recognizable family. And the girl was being trafficked after school. So she was leaving her parents' house. Her parents were pretty checked out. But she was leaving her house, going to this private school and going to school all day. And then her parents thought that she was in extracurricular activities or hanging out with friends after school, and she was being trafficked for a few hours after school. And then she was going back home. And her parents knew that something was wrong with her. They just thought it was angsty teenage years. But it turned out that she was trying to get extra money because poverty is relative. And when your friends all have the $2,000 shoes and you only have the $1,000 shoes, well, you think you're in poverty. So
Right.
she started getting on some websites to try to make some extra money that she thought she was essentially just going to be I guess a friend to some wealthy older gentleman, and that worked out for her a couple of
Companion or
times.
whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, until eventually one of the dates that she scheduled turned out to be a trafficker. And her entire life was irreparably harmed from that
And
moment
and
forward.
when you say that, the difference that I want people to really hear is like she was in on it, it seems like, for those first couple dates until she met the
Yeah.
trafficker, which I would assume that person had some hold over her, that she was either too
Yes.
embarrassed to tell her parents about, and she had to continue this process of being in this. And you're making it seem like she could come home every day. So obviously he didn't kidnap her. But, it was like she continued to do it because of being probably embarrassed by whatever she was giving. And he was
Right.
threatening her that he was going to tell everybody.
And he got her addicted to drugs, so she didn't
Oh,
know
okay.
how
Yeah.
to right, she didn't know how to get drugs. She didn't know how to administer those drugs to herself. Got her hooked on heroin specifically. And so what the it appears to be a teenager who's making some really bad decisions. In
Yeah.
reality, it was a teenager who made a few bad decisions, which is all teenagers
Yeah.
eventually, made a few bad decisions that then that the last bad decision ended up basically changing her life. And so
Right.
that's the, like you mentioned, Roblox. There's a report that just came out about Roblox and how it is a absolute cesspool. We'll get you a link for your show notes. And the amount of child exploitation and trafficking that is happening on Roblox. And the way that parents need to think about this is a predator is going to go to where the prey is.
Hmm.
So if you have anything that is designed for children, it is like Roblox. It is going to be a magnet for predators who want to prey upon children.
Hmm.
It's that simple.